You're back. Thank you very much. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. By our appreciation, the entire country is hooked to Newsfile. Thank you very much for listening. And we hope that the education will be good enough to get all of us in tune with what is going on and to act accordingly. Now, I'm sorry, but we need to move on. We need to move on. Eunice is insisting on a final point, but we need to move on. Yes.
No, I just wanted to be able to say that the distinction between being executive and non-executive relates to the duties. You see, because if you are executive, it means you are in a regular participating role and a regular knowing role, and then liability, you are closer to liability. If you are non-executive, you are not necessarily absolved from liability if you acted, knew, and participated. But so the distinction is relevant, especially when it comes to liability. And from my reading, the Dr. Tabo did not say, what he said is that in that capacity, he is not involved in the day-to-day management and operations of the company. And my point is that it's a statement of fact and a statement of law.
Okay. Thank you. Now, we started the first round with Mr. Jackson, and here we are back. Now, so can we begin to now look at it from this perspective? I don't know if you can estimate for us what you see to be the implications, because you know I was going to go there and I paused him and said we'll deal with it. So if we can briefly take a look at that, because I'd like us to come back to the report. What are the implications for the banking system, the financial industry, and the economy in general? As we are beginning to learn, many depositors are running to their banks which are not connected, which have no problems, and insisting in taking their monies. Some who are investors are seeking to take their monies. How big is the problem?
If you are a locally owned institution, it is an issue that you have to address, because there is a lot of uncertainty and even outright fear about the security of their deposits. But the issue for me really is this: should this be used, right, as an excuse for not shining the light clearly on our institutions? It is something we have to address, that institutions in a certain class are in trouble. That they are in trouble should not prevent us from shining the light brightly on them. We have a further situation where our heroes are being shown up to maybe have clay feet. And and part of the screaming and shouting, if I may extrapolate from, is because they are our heroes. And the you see, there are multiple issues. One is that as a hero, you are a role model, and so people get disappointed, right? When you seem not to match up to being a role model. That may not necessarily mean that you are worst of all criminally liable or liable in a civil case, but there may be some moral and ethical issues at stake. That being said, right?
Well, the Bank of Ghana says it will commence civil actions and so on.
Yeah,
and it is taking administrative internal
Yes, but I'm
measures.
saying that definitely there's an issue, right? There's an issue to be addressed. Every local institution that takes any form of deposit must stand up and say, I want to show that I'm more reliable, or I'm not like the other institutions that you are worried about.
How do they do that?
By being even more prudent. You see, standing on a platform and shouting, "I'm secure," never gives anybody a sense of security. It is demonstrating that you're secure that gives a person a sense of security. So all of us institutions, and I work for a locally owned institution, must look at our processes and say, how can I show even better than ever before that I am secure? That means now more than ever, you cannot even afford to delay by 1 minute when somebody says, "I want my deposits."
Okay.
Every delay impacts on you. But I am going further than just the effect. The effect is there. And you heard Dr. Ndom in the last few days coming out and crying and saying, patronize your local institutions. The challenge there, though, is this. People will choose their banking institutions not based on patriotism, but they will choose them based on, is my money secure? Does it meet my requirements of convenience, speed, and so much more? So I'm saying, shine the light. We will suffer, but we'll be stronger for it. We need strong local champions rather than weak and sickly institutions.
Okay, I'm taking your brief points on this. Yes, Dr. Tuahini, what do you anticipate? How long are we going to go through, or the local banks or financial institutions, how long are they going to suffer this?
It depends upon the party, depends upon the strategy the regulator puts forward. Although he's been talking about certain things, good corporate governance and regulatory capital and whatever have you, financial holding. If is able to enforce and implement, it has been tried and tested in Nigeria. When they also had crisis, certain strategies and policies were set down. It helped them. So it's about, what we have, are we going to enforce it? Or is it going to be one of those top shows? Because, see, people have set octopus institutions. People have set pyramidal schemes where monies are tunneled from here and there. People have created regulatory arbitrages. People have deliberately created systems where they can tunnel money here and there. All these things, Bank of Ghana regulation, like the financial holding regulation, is trying to address these things. But let me tell you about the impact. I'll read something to you from the IMF report. IMF report 2018, latest in April. According to the IMF report 2018, the private sector credit has declined from a peak of 50% in 2014 to 12.8% in December 2017. And I won't be surprised if they do a review, we're going to see the credit will decline further to 10. Because the banks are they were choked with non-performing, which were not properly assessed. So because the area for the space for granting credit was getting a little. Again, confidence. This week, we've heard it all over that people are moving monies from the local and indigenous banks to foreign banks. Like what Mr. Jackson said, what is it that people are moving? People possibly do not blame people behind it. I haven't heard Standard or Barclays creating a pyramidal scheme where they take deposit from here, they channel it there. No. If you're called to do banking and stop these octopus institutions people have said siphoning money here and there. And once people know that Ghanaians are fond of doing that, then it's going to hurt us.
Yes, right. Can we imagine what it is like? Are we able to measure what the implications are like? And again, in Parliament, should they open up what they are going to do? Will it further hurt the confidence?
So in this regard, you're concerned about the aftermath of these incidents. One, we have a situation on our hands that requires clarity above all else. A lot of the debates around this table has been because the Bank of Ghana has not really provided up-to-date, substantive information concerning its findings in a manner that allows people that really want to take a deep look at the situation to do so. So what it has done is that it keeps leaking all manner of tidbits to media, and then provokes a debate, then goes and hides somewhere, then comes back again. It's unseemly. It's completely unseemly. And I feel that the sooner it issues a green paper of some kind, very comprehensive, and also makes it available to the relevant parliamentary subcommittee, because these ones are actually the reports that are circulating around are caveated in the sense that they are not third-party use and third-party reliance is not allowed.
That's so.
So we have all these problems with these leaked reports, and all of us are being forced to make commentary on them. So that is one thing I would like to see that the Bank of Ghana says we've done comprehensive investigations, we've followed the do not condemn a person until you've heard them rule, and we're quite convinced about the situation, and the policies that we've implemented are the policies that are right on account of these particular
Bottom line, my question is there another way they could have approached this to avoid the cascading effects that we are beginning to see? People are doing panic withdrawals, and the experts suggest that is going to affect the local banking industry.
No, because what has happened is that the notion of what is an impaired asset, what is a non-performance asset, had become a term of art in Ghana. The Bank of Ghana has clear classifications of what is an impaired asset. 90 days of non-servicing, you have to start classifying. Doubtful, etc., etc., and start making provisions. Then we got into a situation where people who have facilities that for a year were not being serviced, and they are still on their books. So there was a huge failure of enforcement. And that brings us to this point around the administration that was, the Asian regime, and the administration that is. We've seen an improvement in the enforcement capacity of the bank. We've seen an improvement in the bank's willingness to take on very powerful financial institutions. And I think that is an improvement. Where we have not seen an improvement is the culture of the regulator when it comes to the way that it sets policy and the way that it executes policy. So it's not just a matter of continuing enforcement. It's also important that it sets policy and is seen to set policy in a way that is justifiable at all times. And part of that will be how it engages its various publics, the policy community in Ghana, the banking community in Ghana, the financial industry, and the rest of it. Clear missing gaps in this situation. One, to date, the bank refuses to clarify whether it is indeed sure that some of these activities that have gone on are criminal in nature. They say they've referred people to IOCO in a manner that suggests investigations, as if we don't have the capacity ourselves and we've asked IOCO to intervene. Or is it that we've come upon evidence that we strongly believe to be criminal, and therefore we are asking IOCO to confirm?
Okay.
It's not clear in that regard.
Okay.
Secondly, we have a situation also where, as far as I'm concerned, the policies that it's put in place for the long-term remediation of the situation are not very sound. So it continues to happen, policies like minimal capital, stated capital, as if it's going to make a huge contribution to the current landscape of banking. And it won't. If you look at countries like Kenya, where minimum capital, stated capital is $10 million, and return on equity is 24%, compared to Nigeria, where they are hovering around 16%, but I have $70 million in. You can do the regressions across as many jurisdictions as you can.
All right.
There is nowhere that you can establish that raising stated capital, as opposed to capital adequacy, which is a completely different animal. But then they keep confusing the public as if the capital measures that are important must necessarily reflect in higher capital. What you do when you do that, what you do is that you are trying to inflate assets, financial assets. We have $1 billion equity. They are making a return in the region of about, last I checked, it is about $600 million. I need to double check. But no, $300 million as an industry-wide. That's reasonable. You get what I mean? Now, if you try and say, look, now I want you to increase your stated capital to about $90 million, it inflates access, because then the only way I can get return of equity is to give out more loans.
Okay.
And we know that what has happened over time is a very straightforward situation where cost of funds keep increasing. As cost of funds keep increasing, only the riskier borrowers continue to borrow. As the riskier borrowers continue to borrow, non-performing assets rise. As non-performing assets rise, cost of funds then increase again. It's a death spiral. It's a classic adverse selection issue.
Okay, right. And once again, very briefly, and I'm sure that we all obviously ought to be cautious about sounding as though the panic withdrawals are happening across board. People are carefully looking where they can find security, safety for their money. But as we have heard, followed the reports, including as Joy Business put up in the course of the week, people are taking their monies and taking them to non-indigenous banks. Are you able to measure what this situation will bring? And do you also think there was another way we could have had to avoid it?
Samson, you know, the implications are frightening. My view is that if you look at the way the central bank has sought to manage this crisis, I think that they were well-intentioned, had a good strategy, have been sitting on information which they were managing very professionally. Because you see, the integrity of a banking system is based on confidentiality, people's trust and confidence. So anything that goes to dent the trust will collapse the system. And that is what the current management of the bank has been trying to do all along. Then we start stampeding them with all of these pressures and calls for disclosure and hang this. And so in order to buy some space, information is then dropping from all sorts of sources. Because remember, in all of this, there are always competing interests. And if you look at so far the information spill, what it has done is what has led to the crisis that we are in, particularly in relation to indigenous banks.
Okay.
Now, remember that Ghanaians are generally, we only recently were getting largely banked. We all like to hold on to our money because we have a history where monies were confiscated in banks. People are overcoming that. Coupled with all of that, we're all getting into the banks. Ghanaian indigenous are now setting up banks and progressing. Samson, I have clients who operate savings and loans companies, who operate banks, where people come and say, you know, I trust you, but I just want my money. Because they've been doing business for years, never had a problem. Because we are now calling everyone a crook, everyone a thief, everyone. As if, as for Ghanaians, we can't do anything right. We're throwing the baby out with the dirty water. Now, look at the names that Dr. Otabil has been called, the kinds of things that have been said about him. Tomorrow, another young man goes to somebody who is keeping his step and says, Mr. Tuan, can you come and help, inspire, lead something I'm doing? He says, me, I'm on retirement. I want my quiet. He wants to go home and sleep and not be ridiculed and called all sorts of names by people.
Is there not a way you can check to be sure what you are signing on to?
No, but I'm just saying, in the way that we haven't even given the benefit of the doubt. We haven't waited to find out whether, in fact, they acted in breach. We have already concluded. You have Dr. Dufour. If you retire as governor of a bank and finance minister and all of that, I think you can have a very comfortable and peaceful life. But he decides that he wants to create employment. He wants to be an entrepreneur.
He was governor for almost 2 decades.
Almost goes to put his substance in a bank. Today, people are running around calling them all sorts of names. We are going to kill our prophets. You see, entrepreneurs take risks. When people take risks, mistakes can happen.
But the problem is that in Ghana, we don't see personal bankruptcy. We don't see corporate bankruptcy. We see situations where it's evident that there's been problems in the way the business has been run.
Yeah,
whether it's misfortune or not.
The greatest democracy in the world is led by a wealthy man who has been bankrupt 3 times.
Yeah, so he's
if he were in Ghana, would have flushed him down a toilet.
I'm not sure.
We are already, but look at, Bright, find out when you leave, you do research. That's why you have numbers. Find out what is happening to any Ghanaian-owned bank in this crisis. People are stampeding them. You know how banking is structured. If all your depositors or a majority of them show up on one day looking for their money, can you get it for them? You obviously can't, because the money is gone out to work. Now, when they come and you say, come tomorrow because my account is in credit, Then there's the fear that we have already started. We have stampeded the regulators to now try to play the game. What I'm urging the regulators to do is to stand their ground. Do what they were continuing to do. They should not release information unless on a right to know and need to know basis. Deal with state agencies and institutions that can assist them. Do both internal reform, external reform, improve governance and regulation.
Should not have a public inquiry?
Not a public inquiry. Why do you want people even to know how much money you have in a bank, Samson? You see, it is this public inquiry business that is created, is the publication, the information that has leaked. When the chips are down, you realize that a lot of this information the central bank has had for a long time, but have been acting professionally and trying to manage the situation.
Dr. wants to make a comment on that.
I want to make
Should it be public?
No, what I'm saying is that...
Should it be public?
No, he said something. You know, all along when we were talking about, he's talking about the regulator. In his submission, he's talking about governance. You just made mention of governance. You see, in this time of businesses, you cannot just stay away from governance. And that is the failure of it, is that we have not adopted straight corporate governance in Ghanaian business practices.
Okay, so I'll read out the portion on corporate governance.
I have worked in a bank.
And failure of corporate governance. Let's pick the Bryce Simmons' view on whether or not it should be a public inquiry or not.
You know, Mr. Tuya,
a public inquiry is problematic because then you fall into the immunity issues of the actual outcome itself being a judgment, and you have to go to court of appeal and everything. But certainly there has to be a televised parliamentary inquiry to this matter.
Okay.
No.
We've seen it all over the world.
Right.
Where countries where they have banking systems that are larger than ours, with systemic implications far more severe. And we've had televised parliamentary inquiries.
Okay.
No, but those...
Even recently, those
economists are underestimating public inquiry.
No, those economists,
the three of them agree on that. You
economists,
disagree.
I think it should be a confidential inquiry. I think that the central bank should go back to their conservative culture of managing and containing these things and dealing with them professionally.
No, people are really angry.
Yeah, but that is why are people angry? Because of the misinformation and the way people use and apply information.
Would increase the rumors.
No.
And will put strong institutions at risk because we don't know. There are institutions in this country that are well run, that are doing well.
Yes.
Okay. What do you say to those who suggest
at
that?
the moment, what we are doing is we are tarring the lack of information is tarring everybody with the same
What do you say
brush.
to those who suggest that foreign investments and foreign investors who we need a lot more will not come in because they have seen that even your regulator is incapable of regulating you properly, and so if you put it on television, there's a lot more that will be seen that will drive down your economy rather.
Samson, I disagree.
Okay.
And I disagree on several issues. If you are an investor from outside, you want to see a regulator that is making an effort to clean up a system that is going bad, then I have cause to put my money in there.
Okay.
So a regulator that is black boxing the situation will not inspire confidence.
Yes.
Now, on another issue, I lived in Nigeria, right? I lived and worked in Nigeria through the Sanusi era, where we had pretty much the same thing. In fact, almost as if we're reading from the same playbook, to the point of where some of the executives at stake were well-known leaders in the largest church in Nigeria, etc. The same playbook, complicated by the fact that the governor then was a Muslim cleric.
Okay.
But guess what happened? Even the threat of jail eventually meant that a lot more was recovered of the assets than would have otherwise
All right,
been.
thank you. Right. Yes, 30 seconds. You wanted to make a point.
No, what I was
I
saying
want
is
us
that
to be able to quickly look at
what Joe
the
was
reports.
saying. The statistic that bears it out is very clear. Capital adequacy across the industry is around 15%. We had a situation where uniBank had minus nearly 500% plus. Minus 500% plus. Now what that means is therefore, you have a situation where some banks are very reasonable. A small group of banks appear to be heavily, heavily impaired.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the ordinary person does not have the understanding in terms of the way that these things cut across. And so you need to have, first of all, be extremely cognizant of the political economy and hold inquiries that boost confidence, because it suggests that there is no complicity.
Okay.
If you don't take care, people are going to suggest that there is complicity at the very top.
Okay.
And that these monies have been used for financing campaign politics and all that.
And for that matter, no bank that doesn't have problems and that doesn't have ups and downs. It's just that there are minimum thresholds.
Okay.
When you drop below that, it's a problem. If we resort to making this matter more public than it is now, that we run a risk of crashing the system.
So you mentioned governance, and this is what the executive summary spoke about in respect direct about uniBank. It says that uniBank's governance and operating framework is broadly fit for purpose, but the board and management have not always adhered to the established framework. The endemic culture of non-compliance has contributed to the continuous deterioration of capital, notably in more recent periods, and contributed to the bank's inability to operate a profitable and compliant, I think they meant to say, to operate as a profitable and compliant business. Now, when they went through everything, they gave options as to how to go forward. They had blamed the fact that uniBank, comparative to other banks, just trying to read certain portions, they put them in, they are so tiny that it becomes a little difficult now. They compared uniBank with different other banks and made the conclusions that, for example, uniBank had almost over 800 staff with 52 branches. And then they compared with other banks in the country which had more branches, had lesser staff.
No, actually what has happened was that unibanks, when you look at the number of permanent staff, around 800, and the number of branches, it appears reasonable across the industry standard.
Okay.
However, when you dig further, you find out that they've outsourced a huge chunk of the, the teller work, etc. And that then immediately tells you the problem that arises because they outsourced it to related parties.
Okay.
And so then it becomes 1,900 staff,
Right.
and all of a sudden the indicator degenerates. So what we are trying to say, in essence, is that in the case of uniBank, there was difficulty because of the way that they do their disclosures. So everything that they tell you, when you look deeper, you find something else.
Okay.
But of course.
So that was part of the problems they mentioned. And I'm just going through them. And then they gave scenarios as to how to, resolve the problems. They gave scenario A to F. Scenario A was that shareholder repayment of advances and recapitalization. Shareholder delivers on outline offer to repay shareholder advances and recapitalize 2.0 billion Ghana cedis cash injection with further cash injection value TDB from refinancing personal assets. Then they gave option B, third-party recapitalization. Option C, nationalization of the bank. Then option D, bridge bank and liquidate residual. I think that's what we have done. Then option E, P&A setting assets and liabilities to another bank and liquidate residual. And final option, which is option F, full liquidation via receivership, and ended up preferring the fourth option. That's option D, bridge bank and liquidate residual. Now, we also have been made privy to certain documentation that suggests, as I pointed out earlier, that the bank, for a consistent period of about 3 months, when the central bank began to intervene, then downgraded it at each of its visits, and then wiped out, impaired its assets, and also its loans, its loan books, to the tune totaling 5.7 billion. And that is what brought the bank to the point of insolvency. Do you think that from what we are familiar with, we have become aware with, there was an opportunity, at least Bright mentions that uniBank is the biggest in the scale of things. Do you think that there was an opportunity of survival rather than the Bridge Bank?
If I listen to your submission about the options, I had the 2.2 to be paid.
Yes.
And then recapitalized.
Right.
That was a very good option given to them. But it should have, I think it came with timelines. I believe they gave them timelines. That would have been the best option for both the shareholder. Pay back what you have taken and then recapitalize. That is the best option. So that you maintain the ownership.
They offered to start the injection by
in
July.
The scenario modeling, even after doing this injection, you still have medium-term insolvency. So it will address the short-term insolvency, but there was still medium-term insolvency.
Well, if you pump the 2.2 billion,
because the capital deficit was 7 billion.
That would 7 billion, so that doesn't even come in. Then you go to the nationalization. Well, then we were heading for disaster. I believe what they did, looking at the information given to us now, what they did is the best option. Because fully liquidation could have been a kiosk.
Okay.
See, fully liquidation could have been a kiosk. Now, they have done the PA system where they have now taken part of it, added to other people, and recapitalize it. If they had let it go fully liquidation, I believe the cost to central bank, to government, would have quite be enormous.
Interesting. Okay,
But
so
there's something that you said, which we need to clarify.
Right.
The reason why the Bank of Ghana kept degrading the quality of the asset over time in terms of their review was simply because standard classification were not being followed. So if the bank is supposed to be doubtful, but you are still keeping on your books using bullets and all these other techniques that bankers use to continue to evergreen the loan, and the Bank of Ghana is now taking a conservative stance, they will continue to degrade it.
Okay.
So the 3.7 billion one was almost the one, that was the one that they said had been given to shareholders.
Right.
And that one they've literally impaired to zero. They are saying that they're not going to cover any of it, which is where I think I agree with Mr. Yolini that we have to be careful, because if you are saying almost $800 million have been handed out to business partners of the Dufour family, and we cannot get any of it back, you need to say more than that.
Okay.
This country is not going to accept these kind of blankets,
Okay, so let me read it. Let me read this to to enhance what he's trying to say. Now they say that
right. A little clarification here. They're not saying that if you degrade, it means provide it. Provide for the loss, but you're still going to have to go after that money and try and retrieve it.
So they're saying
unless you write it
They
off.
said it's not irrecoverable. They suggest it's irrecoverable.
So they're suggesting we should write it off.
And also, why they accelerated is that, previously they were using the Bank of Ghana classification. But when you come to international financial reporting standards, it doesn't give you IF32 and doesn't give you that option. You see, if the facility is not properly collateralized, especially when they say collateralized, not shares, your collateral a building or something that can be disposed of within a space of time, you are allowed to do that.
Okay.
But once you apply the international financial reporting standards, you don't have that option. And I believe when they went for the first time and the second time, they decided to apply that one, and that accelerated the huge disclosure of
in the beginning, when they applied IFRS 9, the gap wasn't that
huge.
Right.
Then all of us, they got more disclosure. Things became
Okay,
worse.
so this is what they say, and they wrote this on the 18th of January 2018 to the Banking Supervision Department, and they call it post-on-site unconventional examination involving monthly auditing and downgrading of some uniBank credit facilities. It says, we wish to draw your attention to what is clearly unconventional treatment of uniBank by the Banking Supervision Department, DSB, of the Bank of Ghana since 15th of August 2017. This unconventional treatment has taken the form of monthly auditing and downgrading of credit facilities, which had already been provided for during the 2017 annual on-site examinations. 1. You would recall that between 15th May and 21st of June 2017, the DSB conducted on-site examinations of uniBank. Then they give somewhere to see where that was done. And then they say the results of the examinations were dispatched to the management of uniBank. The results revealed that 1. uniBank's reported capital adequacy ratio of 10.70% had reduced to 8.24% following the downgrading of some loans. B. The total paid-up capital of uniBank as of July 2017 stood at 422.10 million. And then they refer to the classification sheet, recapitalization sheet by the Bank of Ghana, which shows that uniBank at the time was at least the most capitalized among the banks because it was the most capitalized among the banks. So,
but that's just paid up capital, which is a mistake that a lot of people keep making.
So they say that whilst uniBank was waiting for the complete examination report, another team of inspectors visited uniBank to audit and downgrade the same credit facilities on which the provisions had been made during the just ended on-site examination, the results of which were dispatched on 15th August. When the CAR was reduced for 10.70 to 8.24%. Then between 15th August and the end of August, further auditing and downgrading were conducted on these same accounts, and these reduced the CAR again from 8.24% to 4.80%. This means that the month of August alone, August 2017 alone, the CAR was reduced twice. First from 10.70 to 8.24, and second from 8.24 to 4.80. Let me read a concluding portion.
So in essence, what they are saying is that the bank arbitrarily reduces the adequacy ratio based on these fiat. But what uniBank doesn't tell you is that subsequent investigation also shows that they were suppressing liabilities on their balance sheet.
Okay.
So there were people's accounts that existed. Let me make it very simple. People's put money in accounts, but they were not disclosing to the regulator.
Okay.
To almost a tune of $400 million plus.
All right. This is what they say on that. And let me read that quickly and then we can go on. It said, given a lot of things that are happening, the shareholders have committed to provide funds amounting to 2.4 billion Ghana cedis and assets worth 4.4 billion, totaling 7.1 billion, far above the 4.9 billion gap indicated in their letter. That is the letter by, I think, the official administrator and the Bank of Ghana. Indicated in your letter dated 31st May 2018. The shareholders are committing these funds and assets to ensure that this will result in a well-capitalized, liquid and solvent bank, and believe that the official administrator will come up with a model in achieving this objective.
So here is the problem.
Right.
The shareholders were willing to take all the assets of some of the major related parties like House of Dufour assets, Numa Logistics, Alban Logistics, etc., and use that to capitalize the bank. The problem that arises is that in some instances, some of these assets have been purchased with depositor funds, which have not been properly disclosed. So the more you dug into the complications of it, then the Bank of Ghana, this is not one of these lead reports, the Bank of Ghana's official statement, said that they had made some of these commitments, but in the intervening period, they had failed to live up to them.
Okay.
So they have said, for instance, that we will inject capital from here and there, and then that had not materialized. So over time, these commitments were not seen as credible. The point, though, is this, and that comes back to your point around, do you want to jail people or do you want our money back? If it does appear that recovery of these related party transactions is going to require the cooperation and the continued cooperation of these same people we want to jail, then the Ghanaian public is going to have to make up their minds. Do we want the cooperation of these people in order to recover as much money as we want? Or do we want to jail them, in which case they're not going to cooperate? So I think that is a very important and a very stark choice.
Even for me, more importantly, but also fix the system. Fix the system.
What they seem to suggest, what they seem to suggest by this, is that they had enough and even more than what you required, and that if you say that the taxpayer is being saddled now, it is your option. You have decided to plant the taxpayers' money into this.
Samson,
it is not their liability.
So my whole point is that you then see that there are two sides to this story at the very least. So people are either speaking from information they've got from one side. This report itself has a caveat that they have not evaluated matters of regulatory compliance. So when you begin to dig, you see that uniBank on their own have a side to the story, practically suggesting that you stampeded us into a crisis and shut us down.
Why will anybody do
Now,
that? For what motive? For what motive?
Well,
will they,
but I'm
will they
just
come
saying,
in
you
and do
are
that?
the one reading it, because that a few months ago we were the healthiest.
Yes.
Then suddenly, 1, 2, 3 months
After you came in.
That is why I'm saying that we need to step back. The public agitation will be there.
No, but their being healthy was based on a miscontrol of the fact that they have paid up capital.
Because if you ask me, from experience,
yeah.
I have recovered loans that were not collateralized. And there have been loans that were collateralized that I couldn't recover. You know that from banking experience. So the fact that a loan is unsecured does not necessarily make it a risk, but you now have standard
valuation.
You have standard operating.
Time out.
It affects valuation.
It does, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
A loan and say that this is is collateralized.
This is
B-
collateral.
Mr. Choi, let me tell you, the banking you have practiced is different from the banking maybe I have read and learned about. Banking historically was banking that was based on trust and confidence. So your bank manager knows you, you're a person of substance and integrity. You walk to him, he trusts you and takes risks with you and gives you money and you pay back. And there are people who do that. Of course, understandably, banking has moved on. Yes, but in the current rating and standard protocols, you can't get money. That is why the moment I said that you
can... We need to end the program.
We have a few minutes to end this segment.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this segment as in the banking discussion.
Okay.
But something just to land is to say that these things you are reading tells you that we have not seen the full picture yet. And that is why I think that before we do go this public journey and impair people, and when the facts become clear, we realize that we have already caused irreparable reputational damage, we've destroyed brand, we've destroyed people's businesses, let's have a confidential inquiry. If we have a confidential inquiry and the facts are established, a decision is then made to name and shame.
Okay, thank you. Now,
otherwise, we risk the entire system.
Yes, Doc, you see, Bright refers to the position that the Bank of Ghana held uniBank to be, the most capitalized in July 2017. And then they complain about what has happened. And irrespective of when they said they were willing to inject so much capital by July of 2018, all of that appears not to have been, respected. The point they make is that, and I can read from here, the point they make is that you impaired the loans, and the loans include substantially loans that stand in the name of government and government agencies. How can you do that? And that was done without their information, and shareholders without involving them. Is that possible?
Yeah, if I can get to the government-related agencies. I think the first week, the second deputy governor, Awazi said that the total amount was 783 million. And if you own 783 million, it cannot collapse a bank. If considering the 5.7 billion, and it's insignificant. When you're doing your research and you talk about 783 as against 5.7, I don't know what is the percentage.
They actually dispute that figure.
Yes, that is what I am also quoting the deputy governor.
Right.
And I'm saying is that I think Bank of Ghana experienced some sort of forbearances. They give timelines they don't fulfill. And also you go down and find there is an undisclosed amount of information. That would have to let you accelerate it. Because the more you keep it, the more possibly you'll be unveiling certain things. Okay. So that might have influenced the Bank of Ghana decision that, look, you've been telling us this all this while. But the information coming to us when we come there is different. So for me, I don't falter them for accelerating it. And I want them to state that the government debt cannot itself could have collapsed the bank. Because if you look at what the report they say we shouldn't believe in, shareholder-related lending It's incredible. If what they are saying is true, it is nowhere near the government unpaid debt.
Okay.
So I think for Bank of Ghana, they had no option but to take this option that
Public sector debt is 12%.
All right.
12%.
So in 30 seconds each to all of you. 30 seconds each to all of you, and I'm keeping you to 30 seconds. Yes. What do we do going forward?
We need to separate the successes the Bank of Ghana has struggled in enforcement from the quality of the policies they are making. Okay. We shouldn't get overawed by the fact that they've done such a great enforcement job and stop scrutinizing them on policy.
Okay.
This minimal capital requirement thing is not thought through properly. It's not well researched and it's not grounded.
Okay.
If you look at the paid up capital of all of these banks, you've looked at it yourself.
Right.
Nothing shows that there's a correlation between how much capital stated capital somebody has and their performance. In fact, some of the banks that have actually been liquidated had better paid up, higher levels of paid up capital.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Joe Jackson.
Yes, the laws
30 seconds.
as they exist
What should we do going
are
forward?
adequate enough.
Okay.
It is an issue of compliance. It's an issue of that there are individuals who have brought the system to its knees.
Back to them.
Let's fix it.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Chiahini.
Yeah, like Bright said, Bright has made a point that I have spoken about. Capitalization does not resolve this.
Fundamental problem.
I have said it. Nigerians have tried it, and I say it on program. Nigerians have now changed what we think.
Yeah, they've capped it.
Yes, now you cap it in sectors. We have retail bank with the capital. We have this on, but if you cluster them all, then you are heading for disaster. And where we'll be heading for disaster is the recapitalization and mergers.
Okay.
There is what we call too big to fail.
All right.
And that can be very dangerous for this country.
Okay.
Because if any of the big one,
Right.
like, sorry to say, one of the big ones is to fail. I don't know how much you want to build them out.
Okay.
So we have to be very careful about this.
Okay, Yoni, yes, way forward.
Asset inflation.
Way forward is I appeal to Governor Addison and his team. You have a finance sector to fix. You are not a PR man, you are not a politician. Don't join the public fury. Stop being stampeded into having to explain yourself and release information. People will run with it and ruin the work you are doing. Stay in those your walls, that's why they are high. Bury your head in what you need to do. Grind the axe and get the system fixed. If you join the public fury, you will break the public confidence in the system.
The public will certainly be asking questions and they will have to answer them. If the same regulatory entity classified 3 banks, uniBank, GCB, and is it Zenith Bank or so, as those that were meeting their minimum requirement in July 2017, and today we have problem and we have this report contrary, we should ask questions and they must come out and answer. We'll be right back. Thank you very much for this segment of the session. Thank you.
Thank you.